Second decision phase, learning and information gathering. How to homestead, 4 decision phases. Your success is based more on your determination and decisions than in your current skill set. How to homestead, second decision phase. Get ready so you don't crash and burn on your homesteading attempt. Next, we move on to category B4, homestead features. You're going to want to start studying about some of the homestead features that may be involved with your property, with the homestead you're looking for. Few pieces of land may have everything that you want when it comes to a homestead. But if you understand all the different decisions and the different features and what aspects of those are good or bad or indifferent, if you start understanding each one of those questions, you'll be able to know what trade-offs to make. So, learn about these things. Water, there's different sources of water. Obviously wells, there's springs, there's, people have rivers or streams going through. Understand the pluses and minuses of each one of these. There's also rain catchment in many areas. We could probably do a lot of that here with rain catchment, although our summers can be dry. We have about 90 inches of rain the rest of the year, so there's a lot of water coming down. Generally not a good option. I think wells and springs are much better if they're 4-season springs. They aren't always, so, find out what it's like in the middle of summertime. Is it going to work for you? But in general, just study about these systems. Learn about water systems. Learn about what it takes to get the proper drainage on your land. What's that going to be about? The sun exposure. Generally, the general rule is you want southern exposure for growing crops. But you also need to consider, are there hills in the way? Are there trees that are going to block the sun from coming on your property? So you need to be able to think about that, know how to spot those situations. One thing I didn't mention about water is that we talk about wells and springs, but you also should study about ram pumps, about plumbing a system for a well, understanding what's involved there, because it'd be nice to have shallow wells that are only 30 feet that you could pump by hand. That would be great. Where we're at, wells 600 feet deep. You're not going to pump that by hand. I think 30-something feet is my understanding is, and maybe you can go farther, but it's pretty limited to use a hand pump. So ours is an electric pump that goes down the 600 feet, and it's a quarter mile from our house. Well, excuse me, it's not. It's 1,000 feet from our house. Long ways away, so you're involving pumps and electricity. Not the best for an end-time situation, but it's what we could do here. Fire protection is another element. Fire breaks, learn about fire breaks, learn about what should be done in a place that has a fire hazard. If you have a lot of trees around, it's something you should understand going into this. So when you look at a property, you're going to want to be able to evaluate these to some extent. The water, the sun exposure, the soil, understand a little bit about soil types. What is it going to take? What can you do with certain soils and what can't you do? What about the animals? As well, of course, we talked about weather. It really affects what kind of crops you can grow. So obviously you need to look at all these situations in homestead features. You want to study them, learn about them, put them on your list. Next section, B5, homestead real estate. Get real about your homestead. There's a lot of aspects about homestead real estate that are quite important, and you're going to want to start learning about these elements. Before I get into it, a quick story about we have a neighbor over here, and there was some property for sale on the other side of his place. And these are all like 10-acre parcels and such. Anyway, a couple had bought this piece of property up there, and they'd put a fence around it, and I think they're going to drill a well and such. But anyway, so they bought the property, and shortly after they bought the property, the lady comes over and visits my neighbor. And she had come from another country, and the realtor, obviously a real jerk. Anyway, so he had lied to these people about things. Well, she comes over to my neighbor, and she says, we bought the, I won't even try to do her accent, difficult. Anyway, so, but the gist of it is she comes over and she says, oh, we bought the property next door, so now you can cut your trees down so that we have a view of the river. I mean, it just sounds crazy. I just can't even. So the realtor told her that once they bought the place and started setting it up, she just had to tell the neighbor, and he would have to cut down his trees so that their view of the river wouldn't be blocked. So anyway, I mean, the realtors will tell you anything. The developers up here, I can't believe the things they've told some people coming into properties around here. We often try to link up with these people and find out what the realtor has told them. We've had people thinking that they're buying one lot, and they think, oh, I'm going to put up a house for us and a house for our sons and a house for this. And it's like, well, no, this is zoned for single family, which means you can only put up one house. You can only have a single family here, you know. Talk to the county. Just try to tell them to talk to the county. Be careful, but you need to start understanding about the real estate market and what the ins and outs are of it, what the details are. Start out with zoning, for example. What you can and can't do with your property. You can't arbitrarily split it off and do other things with it. It's costly to get zoning changes. You want to know about mineral rights on your property. That's somewhat important in some areas, but do you own what's underneath the ground? Can you dig into the ground? Can you put a well in? Some places you may not be able to because you don't have the mineral rights to that. More important is water rights. Areas where water is scarce, this can be a real issue. People get into places. We actually had some property given to us from my parents that was down in, what was it? It was Arizona. And there's basically no water down there. We gave it away. It was like 10 acres. Was it 20? I don't know. It was a decent amount of acreage, but an area where there's no water. I mean, it's basically a desert, you know. Yeah. So it was pretty much useless. So understand about the water rights, how you're going to get your water. It's super important. Easements. Understand about easements. There's easement is like a, I think there's deeded easements. We have easements here for our well, which is actually now on property that's owned by someone else. We have a drain field that's on another property over there, because when they built this place, those were all here. They had 80 acres, but then it was later subdivided. So something you want to understand about easements. There's easements for access, easements for wells, easements for your, can be drain fields. Mostly easements are for access and roads, but, understand about easements. Some areas, understanding the timber rights is important. Here where we are, you can have your property zoned for forest reserve, which means you're basically raising trees on that part of your land, and you get taxed accordingly. You don't get taxed as if it's your home. If you had 10 acres and all of it's considered your home, then your taxes are going to be much higher than if 1 acre of the 10 is considered your home and the other 9 is in forest reserve. So that's just something, to keep in mind in areas where you have forest land. Similar situations arise for farming. You can have a farm and have your house separate from the farm. Obviously, it takes more to qualify for those elements, but find out about them. Timber rights. Timber rights. You want to look into that, understand what kind of timber rights. And this is specific usually to the area that you're going into. So, I would start studying these pretty much after I had figured out the geographic area I wanted to live in. Animals. Different areas have different rules about what kind of animals you can bring in there. Some animals do better in some areas than others as well. We're in a kind of a cold climate. Some people raise alpacas around here that do very well. But there's someone else putting cattle in. Maybe, it's temperate enough that you can have cattle, sheep, and all that as well. Setbacks. One of the things on rural properties, we're used to setbacks in the city, and we saw setbacks of like 3 to 5 feet. You couldn't put up your hot tub or an outbuilding within 3 feet of the fence line. Well, you get out here on rural property, all of a sudden that's at least 20 feet, could be 40 feet in some instances. There was a outbuilding I was going to put up, and I looked into easements, and yeah, I had to be over 20 feet away. And in some instances, certain things had to be, I think it was 30 or 40 feet. Anyway, the distance of the easements, I understand what that's about. Excuse me, easements. I said easements again. Setbacks. I understand the setbacks in your area. Surveying. You should have a basic understanding of, looking for the, the stakes and how something is surveyed. And if you do get really interested in a property, I would highly suggest a survey, because what you're shown and what is actually on the deed could be different. Many people have been burned. People have started building a house and gotten partway through, had a neighbor complain, and found out their property was 20 feet over on the neighbor's property because the developer told them and maybe even staked out an area differently than what the county had listed for it. So be very careful. Don't guess. Don't guess. Pay the money. If you get to that point, you're building, pay the money. Get a professional survey. Get it done right. Red zones, area we're at, we have a lot of slide activity up here in Washington. You want to, like I showed earlier, there's maps for that. You can find out where the slide zones are. I know one of the developer here is lying to people, and he's trying to sell property that's in a red zone that people are not allowed to build on. But he lies to them. So California, you would not get away with that. I don't know how that works here. But anyhow, so you're going to have to learn these things yourself. Don't trust the developer to tell you the details about it. Look at the property, look at the history. Right now, you're going to be just picking up your knowledge. You need to learn what's important. Next, we get into moving strategies. How are you going to get your stuff from where you're at to where you want to be? Sometimes this may take a little finagling. How to make the transition. Of course, we come back to the job situation. If you're working for a living, this is probably going to be the key factor as to how things can come together with your actual moving strategy. Because you need to have the job issue resolved first. And you need to kind of know what kind of a homestead situation you're moving into. Obviously, don't put the cart before the horse. You need to figure out geographic area and some of these other parameters, kind of so you localize the area you're going to. At least know kind of the area where you want to set up a homestead and know what you're going to do for a job situation. And then in your moving strategies, probably the first thing is simplification. Get rid of the stuff you don't need. You find most of the stuff you really don't need. Give it away. There's lots of needy people out there that can use even furniture and all this. Start simplifying. Now, in some instances, it'll depend, too, on what is the distance of your move. If you're going a long ways, like we're moving from the middle of California to, up here in Washington, Oregon, Washington area, and that's where we're looking at. That's a fair distance. You don't want to have to drive to go look at properties. You want to be living there to be able to assess the properties in general. There's often a lot to look at. So we decided that it was best for us to actually get up here. And that's why our strategy involved us using our trailer as it'll be a bug out later on, but right now to use our trailer as something to live in, to get up to the area to look at property. So we sold our house. It's also difficult if you're trying to sell one house and have it link in with buying the other house. Trying to get the timing of those two can be very difficult. So this eliminated that problem. The idea was to eliminate as much stuff as we could, put the rest in storage, and then once we sold the place, to bug out with our trailer, come up to the area around where we wanted to live, and then start looking at properties in earnest from there. Now, we did another thing with that in that strategy. We put things in storage, but I also had to get the trailer ready. But then the other thing was to get a storage unit up here that I could store my tools in and other items that I couldn't carry in the trailer. Because I knew when we did get a place that I'd have to jump on it pretty fast and hard to start working on the house. So I was going to need table saws, all these things. So it made sense to have a storage unit nearby. So that was just the way we went about it. I'm just saying that you need to have some kind of strategy. think it through. How are you going to make that transition from one place to the other? I just want to show a couple of fun little images here. When we decided to move out, put everything in storage, I decided what kind of storage shelves. So I laid out some storage shelves that I could build quickly. That would be the most efficient use of space and of the lumber required, and actually even measured out every piece of furniture we had and figured out, because I had to figure out what size storage unit we were going to need and how I could stack it up. So I went vertical and built some modular things for it. But even before we moved, I had to figure out what size storage we were going to need and how we were going to put things in there, how we were going to fit it in. And even for, originally we were going to be in Oregon, so I had figured out what I would have to take up here with me to work on a place. So this also involves the 5x5 storage up here and the different items that I'd be carrying along, and stacked up vertically. So here are whole sets of racks that I built to store items, furniture stacked vertically. I had washer dryer things stacked. There's the washer dryer actually, but there were things up above on top of that. And so you can get a compact storage. We ended up, let's see, probably about 8 months the items were in storage. We were up in a trailer park for 6 months, and then it was a couple more months after we got this place that we ended up being able to move our stuff out of storage. Oh, there's a I had mentioned that I had set up plans for a house, and this is just some quick shots of those plans. Front view, back view. Here's the lower floor plan. Here's the garage, and obviously over here we got like the kitchen area, dining room, living room, bedroom, and then there's a bedroom up on top. But anyhow, the beauty about doing your own is I was able to work all this out to where we've got the wood stove, we've got the heat from this, running a water system. Everything was set up. There's a root cellar underneath it. I mean, everything was just designed to where, everything was designed to, optimize our resources, and so we could live off grid. And it was a pretty nice design. Yeah, there was the upper, obviously I even designed and laid out where all our furniture was going to go. No, I was part of the design. And this was all set up to where I could take it to a draftsman and be able to have plans created. Now that's when we actually, that's our place, and once we came up here and got the water system going, and there were a few other things I had to take care of, then we were able to go down to California, get all our things out of storage, and bring it up here. And then Mrs. RH actually condescended to driving the smaller of the trucks. So that was very brave of her. She's very afraid of driving big trucks, and she did really well. And we got a nice drive up here through the snow. This was in December, coming over the hills in the snow. So you do what you have to do, right? Yeah, there's some, rural, you can find rural property real estate. Here's a Google search, rural property search sites. So you see there's a number of them that you could be selecting. A number of different options for rural property search sites. And see, there's like a whole list of them. Now, some of the sites that we found we liked for real estate were Realtor.com. We found that to be one of the better sites for what we were looking for. I don't know that it's the best for rural property, but it was good. At the time that we shopped, the market had collapsed and we were looking for existing places. Trulia, we didn't really care for it very much. Always seemed to be out of date and have problems. So Realtor.com. Here's a Land and Farm. And I'll put all these links up in the description. Land Watch. Lands of America. Numerous sites. Well, I imagine most of you are familiar with Craigslist. So here's Craigslist just pulled up for Yam Hill. I don't know where that is, but so under for sale. I mean, you can find anything, appliances, special farm and garden items. So let's just go under farm and garden. Marvin Gardens. Oh.
Hay bine roller. I don't know what that is. Yeah, usually it's a little easier if you have something specifically to look for, but there's just a lot here. Everything from animals to tractors, everything in between. Oh, I like that outdoor fireplace. Anyway, and there's so many categories. There's just so much to find there. Marvelous resource. And many times you can find good prices. It doesn't mean the prices are always going to be good. Obviously, typically it's the used items on Craigslist you're going to go for. And eBay. Or I just selected solar panels, 300 watts. And anyway, so here's some different things that popped up under solar panels. It's a great way to find various items. Inverter, it actually looks a lot like what I have driving my lights from my greenhouse. But again, with eBay, you're going to just put in your search. You've got a criterion here. You can select versus price, where it's located. If it's something that requires shipping, we tend to, on eBay, we tend to shop for items that are smaller, that don't require expensive shipping. Although sometimes I've purchased a generator through eBay, and I've purchased other large items as well. But if they're from a retailer, they usually give you free shipping. If they're from a private party, then they often charge exorbitant shipping. So you have to watch out for the shipping on eBay. But again, a tremendous resource. And Amazon, the same thing. It's amazing what you can find on there. And very good prices. And of course, there's other retailers as well. Best Buy and, numerous others. Yeah, I seem to have lost the little piece I had on agricultural extensions. I don't want to forget it. And don't you forget them. They're very important. Here's a list here of just number them: Oregon, Washington, Ohio, and New York. I believe all states have them, and there are also some resources in the counties. So check your state and county. There's an incredible amount of information in these, particularly farming, ranching, even putting up buildings. I think it was in Ohio. I found some really great resources on how to build outbuildings and really anything you needed for a ranch. I think there was windmills. There was just so many different things on these extensions. And unlike some things on the internet that I'm let's say I wouldn't trust without checking it out very carefully, these are generally someone's project, and they're generally checked out by people at the school, so they're pretty reliable. And I would highly recommend you start digging into these resources once you figure out the geography, the area you're looking at. And remember, you don't have to be an expert on all things homestead, but if you've learned at least something in all these areas, it'll help you to know what you don't know. If you understand what I'm saying, there are times when people walk into something and walk into a big problem because they had no clue whatsoever that this was an issue. So this is why it's important for you to learn, get a breadth of understanding, whether it's water systems, easements, whatever. Just start absorbing some of this so you start having a clue that you don't walk blindly into a bad situation. It'll help you understand properties. When you look at properties, it'll help you know what prices to expect, costs for wells, costs for if you're going to use a septic versus composting toilets, whatever. You got to look at that too. Anyway, you don't want to walk into these things blindly, so you want to just start doing some studying. You should know enough to know when to check things out more. So it's time to turn off must-see TV and go out and find out about the things that you really do need to know before you get a homestead. Discuss with your spouse or other and about these items and start your learning process. Collecting, reading, putting together information, saving it on your computer of resources that are going to be useful to you, saving the links. Start reading on different websites, YouTube sites.
Just start a file with all the relevant information. It's your information collecting. Homestead decisions. Collecting information. Important phase. Next time we move on to creating your plan, using this information and start filling it into a plan and start working on that plan. Well, creating the plan. And then the last section, phase D or phase 4, is acting on your plan. So next time we get into creating your plan. If there's any additional tips you'd have for people, please comment. We look forward to your comments. Tell us what we did right, what we did wrong, other pieces of information that would be helpful to others. And again, if you like the videos, please give us a thumbie. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Push it down on that subscribe button. Thank you for watching. Hasta la Proyecto. RH here, signing off.